Welcome back to Wizard Supercoach. The streak has finally ended. I wasn't able to make any videos for the last 3 days, and that's purely because I haven't had time. So life has gotten on top of me, as it sometimes does, and I guess it was inevitable that that was going to happen at some point, but still pretty stoked. I got 3 weeks worth of daily videos out in a row, so when I made that claim without really thinking about it, it was probably more than I actually expected to end up doing. Also just hit 250 subs the other day, so yeah, thanks to all you guys for that. I'm stoked. I've only got it's under 50 now to get to the round zero goal of 300 that I set, so yeah, you know what to do if you want to help with that. Obviously today's video is going to be previewing the Dockers. They're definitely one of the most Supercoach relevant teams this year, I think. I certainly hear a lot of people talking about them. I expect them to improve a lot from last year, but I don't think I'm quite as sold on them contending as a lot of other people are. So I see a pretty settled core team here, but those last couple of picks where I've left the question marks, they're obviously a lot harder to predict, I think, especially for someone who's not a Freo supporter. And they're probably where those fringe types like Erasmus, he might end up in one of them. I'm hoping that he gets that last spot on the bench, and maybe O'Driscoll gets the vacant wing, but I got a bad feeling that O'Meara is going to steal one of those spots. They always seem to turn to him for some reason, even though I think he's well past it. Then there's guys like Will Brodie. Like, does he get another go? He's probably not, if we're honest, but we can dream. Like, imagine getting him at a low price again. Depending on the team balance needed on the day, I reckon that last bench spot could easily go to any of the 3 general defenders down here. Like, don't rule Aish out. I still think he's got something to offer. He's just a bit older. As I said, it's pretty hard to predict overall. We know Darcy's going to miss round 1, but who knows how much more he's going to miss than that. So I think that instantly rules out Reedy as a starting pick. Some people have talked about that. Yeah, I'll get to that a bit later. The depth players here, I think it's pretty nicely balanced in terms of numbers here, and there's a good mix of experience and youth too. So yeah, that obviously helps a lot if you are going to have that flag charge. I think the biggest question around this team is which game style are they going to run with, though. Like, either way, I can see it affecting some of these players and not others, just Supercoach wise. So I'm not so sure if they're going to continue with that faster play style that we saw late last year. Like, going into the bye, they were 7-4 and 1 draw. And then post-bye, when they played the faster style, they went 5-6. And they lost the last 4 games in a row as well, and it caused them to miss the finals. So, do any of you Docker supporters, if you're watching, do you want to weigh in on that one? As I said before, I'm not a Dockers man, obviously a Crom Nuffy. But yeah, it'd be good to get some insight from some actual Dockers fans who know what's exactly going on there. So as always, we'll look at the CBA spread and all of that. The Dockers, is pretty straightforward CBA spread for them actually. They basically only use the 4 guys, like Sarong, Brayshaw, Young and Fife. And once we get past this 6-man here, like O'Meara, who he barely even registers with 4% of this pie, there's literally nothing. They don't use anyone regularly at all. So Port and North, they were the only other teams to have 0 in this category here, so they're pretty set as well. It's obviously by design, I think. So does that mean that Longmuir is going to continue it? I mean, it makes it a bit easier for us as Supercoaches to predict, which is one good thing, but it also, I guess, it makes it harder for guys like Erasmus or whoever to get in there and get some CBAs, which we need. So I don't see much changing, to be honest, especially with the first 3 here. And I think Young could even get a small boost, given that his TOG was pretty low last year, 74%. So that's pretty low for a midfielder. I think, though, the rest is the really interesting part of what could happen. So surely Fife, he's going to get at least a small decrease in CBAs this year. Like, he's obviously been a champion for years now, but he's not nowhere near that level anymore. And I think if Longmuir, he's coaching for his job this year, so It makes no sense for him to roll Fife through there as much. Do people think Fife is even a walk-up in the best 22 anymore? Another one, let me know in the comments. It's certainly getting to that point where it's debatable. And then I guess people... Well, I never thought we'd see that where it would be debated. But yeah, I do hear it these days. Even if he does drop, I think, and it opens the door for some others, like some more percentage in there for others, Johnson might be the one that gets a larger increase, which doesn't really help us because he's not really like priced as a pick. And again, I can see a world where Amira gets the nod, and we really don't want that either. I think, super coaches and Freo fans, they'd probably likely agree that we all want to see Erasmus getting a look in there, so hopefully that happens. But right now, I think it's just hope more than anything. Bolton's not been training with the mids at all, so it's possible they're not going to run him through there as much as Richmond did, or even at all. Jackson's been playing some match sim as a CBA mid, not the ruck, but we saw that last pre-season and that never amounted to anything during the season, so take that with a grain of salt. Outside the top three, I think overall it's a whole lot of possibles and there's not a lot of probables, which doesn't help us. We'll look at the kick-ins. They're pretty straightforward. I don't see any reason why Ryan's not going to continue to get that monopoly on these. It'd be nice if Clark can get a few more 3 points. I'm biased given that he's likely to be in my starting team, but yeah, again, it's just probably wishful thinking. I think Ryan will continue that monopoly. So might as well have a look at the peroxide prints while we're at it. Basically, there's two versions of him here. There's the one that was pre the Longmuir stat padding comments, and he was like a god in terms of Supercoach. And then there's the post Longmuir comment version, and he was, well, less than godlike. Especially if you traded him in around the buys like I did. Like, oh my god. Frustrating. So he's probably the player most affected by the game style choice that I mentioned before. If it's slow, we know that he can go absolutely huge, but if it's not, I think he's going to be overpriced here. He's also, having said that, the kind of guy who can destroy all logic and stats and just go nuts anyway. I can recall last year, a lot of people saying, like when it was come time to debate like whether Ryan was a pick or not, they were saying that he wasn't a pick because where would the upside come from? That's the one I kept hearing. So, I mean, it's not a bad question because at the time it seemed logical, but man, did he prove them wrong. So I just wouldn't be surprised if he finds a way to start hot again. So I'm not really looking at picking him, but I would not be surprised. He's obviously extremely durable. Just those 3 games with the calf there, and I don't think it was a bad one or anything. So yeah, I wouldn't let a 3-week calf issue from 4 years ago put you off the pick. There's obviously more important things. And we can see he's pretty consistent scorer, even when he's not going absolutely nuts. He's always sort of been around the mark, and looking at 2023 here, I guess last year's explosion shouldn't have been as surprising as we thought, but you know, hindsight. Pre versus post buy and the win versus loss averages, I think they tie into each other here, so it'd be easier really to just call it pre versus post Longmuir comments and look at those stats. And I just want to say quickly, how good does the red and green look here with the purple and white? Like, Fremantle, just bring it back. If you bring it back, you'd probably be my second team. But it's such a good look. I don't really like the purple and white. It's so dull. Anyway, not Supercoach relevant. He's second of all relevant defenders for points per disposal, so that's good. He's second only to McGovern, so pretty good company there. Shouldn't really be a surprise given that he loves that chip game, which we know it's a really low risk for turnover. He also loves that good 50-metre bomb down the line to a contest, and he does get a lot of it for a defender, but he doesn't need 40 to go huge either, so that's good. I like this here. It's got high TOG too, so that's obviously a nice platform for anyone scoring. Think of like Goulden and that, Nick Martin. So as I said earlier, as a starting pick, I think it purely comes down to to whether you think he's going to go back to his pre-Longmuir comment self. That's a mouthful. Yeah, I guess now the higher price is also a factor, but there's not much else to it than that with him. It's pretty straightforward. What I will say is that I think he's actually a really good defender when he's playing that role and not the seagull stuff. I might be just biased here because I'm biased towards defenders, being one myself, obviously at local level, but surely we can all admit, like, he takes a lot of intercepts and gets a lot of spoils for a guy who's only 6'1". I think people think he's bigger than he is. He's not. Another thing I want to bring up is, why are people so off of the Ryan pick, like, because of the Longmuir comments about the stat padding, but they're still hot on Clark because he dropped off a little bit after that as well. So we'll have a look at Clark now. It's obviously not as big of a drop as Ryan. Clark only lost about 5% on his average after those comments, whereas Ryan lost 21%, which is huge. There's clearly a problem here, though, because Clark is the type who should score better with the fast game style, right? Except for he didn't at all. So if we look at his win versus loss average here, it's entirely possible it's less to do with the style and more to do with the match result. So remember that Freo dropped off post-bye. And I'll come back to this, and yeah, we'll have a look at the rest of it for now. So durability, he looks great. Nothing in the last 3 seasons. Obviously, the recent history is what we want to see. And at least those 20 and 21 injuries, they weren't soft tissue, so that's a tick. Points per disposal looks good, so does the points per minute. I think the TOG has a little bit of room to grow as well, given that he started to go over 90% TOG in a few games late last year. So there's another tick. So I think that all looks good, and it should, like, at his price, they should be good indicators. So now back to the main question. If we take a look at his final 2 games of last year, it was against the Giants and the Power. He scored 60 and 83. So I had a look at his heat maps and what was different about those games, and he played more like a back pocket. Like, he hardly got out of the back 50 at all in those games. So that's quite the anomaly for him. So if we take those 2 games away, his post-buy average up until that point was actually 107.8, which pretty much matches his pre-buy. Like, it's pretty much spot on. So that means he didn't actually drop away until those last 2 games. This is why I reckon that looking into the stats further is important. Like, if you even go one layer deeper, then you get more of a true picture here. And that's what I use these for, is to kind of point me in the direction of where to look. At least that's what I tell myself to justify my complete nerddom. But anyway, so now we potentially, I think, got a new question with Clark. So if the thought I keep hearing is that he could score more with them playing that faster game style, then how come he just scored the same as he did with the slow game style? Well, I don't actually have the answers for that one. I haven't been able to find anything. So let me know what you think in the comments. With all that in mind, I'm not as sold on him as I was, but he hasn't left my team or anything. At the end of the day, I think the win-loss average stuff here, this should take care of it, with Freo very likely to improve. I definitely would like to see a bit more of a ceiling from him, though. Like, he's fairly consistent and stuff, but he only went 120 plus 4 times. So given that he is still prone to some lower scoring games, like around 80 and stuff, we kind of need more of those ceiling scores to even it out if he's going to take that next step. So moving on to the midfield now, and it's last year's headache, Hayden Young. So he made the move from defence to the midfield really late in 2023. I think it was like 5 games or something. And it caused him to be a popular starting pick last year. Now, I started him myself, and I traded him after round 2 or something because he was an absolute clanger machine. And of course, wouldn't you know it, the week I trade him, he goes and drops 130 on the Crom. So I ended up getting him back after that as well. But that probably wasn't the right move either. So I hope I didn't just cause a whole lot of you people to unsubscribe with that, admitting to that poor decision. But anyway, on to the man himself. Straight away, I can see linear scoring progression here, which I really like to see, and pretty good durability, I guess. Like, it's nothing Nothing crazy. It looks like he's getting better with time as well. See more linear progression going this way, more or less. But he's now had that hamstring strain in the preseason, and he's going to miss the first practice game. So that's not ideal, but I wouldn't say that's enough to rule him out as a pick, or at least not that alone. Given his win average here, he's another that should benefit from a stronger Freo. He's pretty consistent too. Like, if you take away those first two, the clanger-riddled games, his pre-bye average is actually around 105. Given his love of a good clanger as well, his points per disposal, it's actually pretty good considering. I wonder how high it might go if he could clean up his ball use a little bit. He should get used to it, I guess, being under pressure in the midfield like that. It's a bit different to defence. But he's already got this high, quite like really high points per minute, and he's got the low tog, which I love that in a potential bolter pick. So apparently he was carrying some niggling injury through last year, and that's why his tog was so low. It's beautiful potential for the growth there, but yeah, if he's fully fit for 2025, that's the thing. Like, he's got to be fully fit, and it was a hell of a pain to watch last year. The fact that his tog was so low, like, he'd just start to score and stuff, and then he's on the bench again. The CBA wise, it's pretty straightforward for him. The more he can get, the more he scores, and yeah, the amount here that he gets in the wins and losses, that's not surprising at all. They're so close, and Longmuir pretty much just uses those first three midfielders in everything. So I'm predicting that he should go 105 minimum this year, but it's entirely dependent on his body and whether he can boost the tog, because I can't see him, this can't go a hell of a lot higher. That's right up there. As I said earlier, the hamstring strain alone, it doesn't rule him out as a pick, but it does make it a lot harder to have faith in the tog rise and his durability when there's so many options around his price as well in the midfield. So sorry if this talk about Hayden Young, it seems like inconclusive, and some of the others too, but yeah, it's not my style on this channel to say, like, pick this player, don't pick this player, things like that. Like, I just present the information mostly, and you can do whatever you want with it, really. Especially when I messed up this pick myself last year. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt. Having said that, pick this guy. Actually, don't, because it'll help my rank if you don't, because I'm picking him for sure. This dude's super consistent, scoring and durability wise. Like, this is ridiculous. Feels like he's been around forever, to be honest, but he's only just turned 25 a couple of months ago. Like, it feels like he's been around a lot longer than Sarong anyway, but I think he's only 1 year older. So yeah, kind of similar to Young. He was playing through niggling injury first half of last year, but we can see once he got that under control, his scoring picked right up, which is nice, and that's why I'm picking him. He also, like his teammates, he scores better in the wins. I think all these Freo players I'm covering, they've all got better win averages than loss. So yeah, it's a good sign for all of them, given Freo's stronger now. Points per disposal, it's less than ideal. Like, I always sort of look for that 4 mark, but there's no reason here to suggest that he's not going to keep racking up these big tallies, because as long as Sarong is fit and playing, he's going to cop the tag, and it's going to leave Brayshaw to basically run free. So I guess it could hurt the pick if Sarong got injured and missed games, because then Brayshaw might get tagged, but that's really just hypothetical stuff. Like, cross that bridge when you come to it if it happens. I think his CBAs are a little misleading here. So the average in the 60 to 69% bracket, it's data from only 3 games, and 2 of those were against bottom teams. So yeah, the post-buy, like, the vast majority of his games post-buy, they were in this 70% range. So I'd say he's actually, yeah, he's just another that scores better with more CBAs. So happy days if he can continue his CBA average from last year, as we saw before he gets a few. And yeah, his CBAs here in the wins and losses, it's close enough. Like Young, I think, Longmuir uses those 3, so it's not really important. I really only use this here to see if there's something deeper to investigate, if there's like a significant differential. So yeah, all in all, like there's not a hell of a lot to say about Brayshaw other than I think he's one of the best midfield picks right now. I reckon he's going to go 115, and even if he doesn't, like his historical scoring suggests he's going to be around 110 mark. So, you know, I could live with that. You're not really going to lose much money, if any. There's been some whispers about him being pushed out to a wing this year, like to make way for others getting CBAs, but I highly doubt that's true. I think we seem to hear that every preseason, and it never really amounts to anything. It also makes zero sense in my mind, given what a great partnership he has with Sarong, and I guess Young as well. So, yeah, speaking of Sarong, we'll move on to him now. He went crazy last year to start, but I think then the taggers came for him, and even then his lowest score was 84, so it's not like he absolutely bottoms out when he's tagged. Like, you know, 84, you're not going to be stoked with that, but you're also, it's not going to ruin your weekend. And that 84, that was only one of 6 times that he didn't ton, so pretty consistent. He's got that linear scoring progression as well, which, yeah, love that. And there's no surprise that he's such a consistent scorer just from looking at this. I think he's got that pedigree. Great durability too. This one here, it's not one of those dirty soft tissue injuries, so we like that. Like his teammates, as I said, he scores better in wins. So, yeah, Freo could just be a massive team for Supercoach this year if they do end up contending for the flag like people are tipping. Like, obviously you got to win a lot of games to contend. So, yeah, I would go as far as saying Freo is possibly the most Supercoach relevant team. His pre and post buy should pretty much more or less read pre versus post opposition attention. So it sucks for him, but it really does help that Brayshaw pick. And like Brayshaw, his points per disposal is not ideal. It's under 4 points, but he does seem to find a way to not let it affect his scoring much. Like as I said before, when he gets tagged, it's still that 84 is as low as he went. So yeah, I'm not stoked to see this, but I guess it could be a lot worse if you're gonna own him. Like this could be a problem. So think of like a Dacos or Lockie Neal. Like if they get tagged, they can get tagged severely, and then they end up scoring 60 points or something. So at least it's not like that. That's just gross, that stuff. I reckon there's a little bit of room here to grow with his TOG. Do we just factor that into natural progression, or is that a completely separate thing in your opinion? Let me know in the comments, I guess, what you define as natural progression. But most players, as they mature, their time on ground does go up. Last year, his CBA average was 79%, so that puts him just below this best bracket that he has. Does he get that little jump needed? I don't know. But to be honest, it's not even an exact science behind this data, given that the brackets are like 10% jumps. So even if he got 1% increase and suddenly he's at 80%, it's not really going to do anything alone. It's not like he's going to jump his average up 12 points off 1% increase. He's clearly getting the CBAs as well, like win or lose. So yeah, he's pretty safe there. I'm not going to be starting him this year. I think basically the taggers are enough of a reason not to, because if you take that into account, he might be slightly inflated in price. Like he's still going to have a good average and all that, but yeah, not really any value there. So he'd be a good pick later on, I think. Yeah, he's still going to be around the mark as a mid, but it's just down to value. And the 600k mids, they're kind of a dirty word these days with the flex discount and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. There's no right or wrong answer, especially not in February. So now, having said all that, watch him prove me wrong, and he'll probably come out and average 140 again off the first 6 weeks or something. Every year, like there's those picks that defy logic and research. Luke Ryan last year, he was one of the examples of that. And yeah, Supercoach, she's a cruel mistress. Like, yeah, you can put as much time into it as you want this time of year. I might actually do a video on that eventually. Have a look at last year's predictions and who was hot and like what the data suggested, who was going to break out and stuff, and might actually have a look at who actually did and who didn't and whether it stacks up. But yeah, that'll be for another video. So I have included Shrek, and I want to start by saying that I'm not stupid. I know he's not a starting pick given his injury setback. He's got to have the screw removed from his ankle, and he's going to miss at least round 1. So I think he's still worth a general discussion though, as a pick later on, given his ability to score that we've seen before. He's kind of like a zombie pick. Like every year he gets killed by injuries, and then every year people still think that he's going to come back different the following year, and he's always talked about. I guess granted this year was a little different because he had lost 15 kilos or whatever it was, and he did look fit. But yeah, that durability, that's the killer here. He's always been a good scorer when he's had a good run at it. Hopefully that latest surgery, that's the last of it, and we can see the more trim version of him in action for a decent amount of time at least. He's got pretty good numbers everywhere here, and that was on like a 98 for him. That's a down year. But the points per minute stands out in particular for me. That's pretty high. Anything that's like 1.1 plus is pretty out there. I don't think he's ever really going to increase this TOG though. Like I expect Freo is probably always going to be cautious with him going forward from here. So yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on him given that he's not really a starting pick, but there's not much to this one either. Like if he ever gets healthy, we know he can score, and he's quite underpriced here for what he can really do. I think a lot of people still point to his 144 average over a 7-game stretch, and that was in the back half of 2021, so it's starting to become ancient history. Like there's been a lot of injuries in between now and then, as you can see, but kind of makes me think, is TDK going to be viewed the same way for years to come? Like, is he going to come up every preseason now, just given that we saw a similar kind of run midway through last year? I'm definitely not sold on him, but yeah. I mean, Shrek's been on the Subway diet, so, you know, that alone, I think, makes him worth a look later on. And given his potential value, no, actually, you know what? Given that there's so many good ruck options, I don't think it makes sense to take such a risk with him. Like, he's the most likely ruckman that his body's going to fall apart. So, yeah, there's just too many safer options, I think. But, you know, if you're a believer, and pardon the pun, then go for it, I think. And now to his mate, Jackson. So, if anyone's even considering Jackson, that is, I'm not actually sure. I think I've heard a few people talk about him, but he's obviously directly tied to Darcy and his availability. So we already know that Shrek, he's going to miss the start of the season, but there's no exact time frame on that yet. So it's a similar scenario to last year where Darcy missed the first 5 games and Jackson was the first ruck. He averaged 110 in that time, and that was honestly pretty underwhelming. It doesn't, the average doesn't sound that bad, but one of those games was 178 against Cherry, and that is not going to happen often at all with Jackson. So the rest of it was pretty underwhelming, I think. It was one of the scores was like 110 and the rest were 90s or lower. So yeah, it's pretty easy to see here that, you know, with Darcy in the team, his scoring drops off a cliff because he's mostly sitting forward and he doesn't get the higher CBAs here that he clearly needs. I think his durability's been good the last couple of seasons, like hasn't missed a game, but doesn't really matter too much given that it's just the Darcy thing. He's not a pick once Darcy returns, so I could see the merit, like last year, in picking him, definitely more than now, but because of the flex spot, and a lot of people are looking to play a ruck in that spot, I think, it kind of makes that forward and ruck link a lot less important because you got more cover there. I think that was Jackson's biggest appeal last year, but, you know, that's just me. I didn't own him, but I could see why people were drawn to that. So let's just assume that Darcy misses the first month again, or, you know, around that, and Jackson manages to go 110 again in that time. Is it going to be worth the trade when you've got to make and get rid of him once Darcy returns? Because don't worry about this. This is basically what you're getting from Jackson as a forward. So you'd have to trade him because he's not going to be top 6 or whatever with that score. You have to trade him once Darcy's back. So is it going to be worth that trade just for the extra few points over those, say, first 5 weeks or whatever? I think most people last year fell in that trap, and that's myself included. We got the extra trades and we were thinking, oh, we won't run out, and kind of go a bit stupid. But I definitely ran into trouble with that later in the season. My forward line just fell apart, and I had to rely on guys like Curnow, which was not ideal. He's on the never again list. But again, back to Darcy. Back to Jackson, not Darcy. There's so many good ruck options. So I guess similar to what I said before with Darcy, it makes no sense to pick either of these guys. I guess Jackson is a little different because he'd be picked in the forward line. So that small cash injection that you'd get with him if he averaged 110, I guess downgrading him to some other forward could work, but the forward line's traditionally the weak line. But again, is it worth that trade that you might need later on? Just, you got to weigh up the points against a trade there, and that's up to the individual. There's no real formula for that one. I think it would be a lot easier to assess this one if we got some or more of an accurate time frame on Darcy. And I think if it's only a month or 5 weeks or whatever, again, it's not really worth messing around with overall. But you got to think of it this way: when everyone else is starting to make the first upgrades in round 6 or maybe even round 5, you'd be going sideways on Jackson. So unless you used a boost, you're not going to be upgrading there. So yeah, let me know in the comments: is anyone considering starting him if we find out he's out for like a month or 5 weeks again? Yeah, let me know on that one. I'm not, but I'm curious. Last player I'm going to cover is Bolton. So he's come from Richmond, and he's going to be in a stronger team now, obviously. But I can't see this pick working out at all, if I'm honest. I would have said his durability is no issue, looking at this. But now he's got some calf injury in the preseason, and that's possibly keeping him from playing the Indigenous All-Stars game. So that's first red flag. Now look at his averages here, and I think that the mid-80s is probably where his scoring really is. Like, these could be outliers possibly, certainly last year. But, I mean, he was checked out mentally last year, and I don't blame him. So, 2023, that's his career best in terms of Supercoach, and I think for him to be a decent pick, that's what we need to see, is something like this, not like any of this. I mean, yeah, there's value there if he scores here, but he's wouldn't be a keeper, I think, mid-80s. I don't see it happening, him getting back to this, and I'll explain that later. Yeah, this is all pretty skewed because obviously last year, like I said, he mentally checked out from what I could see. And yeah, the win-loss, this is pretty far apart. I mean, they only won the 2 games, so there's not much to go on there anyway, but the post-buy drop, if you notice, there's no editing in these videos. No one's got time for that. Yeah, the post-buy drop-off here, it's likely just he had a realization of having nothing left to play for in the second half of the year. And to be honest, he would have known, I reckon, by that point already that he was intending to leave. He would have known a while back. The points per disposal, that's pretty decent, but just remember that the forwards do have inflated rates here, given that they score goals more. And this is a worry. Again, it's because it's an outlier season, but yeah, that's pretty low, and he's got the high tog, so not a nice combo, not ideal. His sweet spot for the CBAs, it's in the 50s, obviously, and that's also where his average CBA percentage has been, roughly, since 2020. So this is the biggest issue for me. So keep that in mind, that for all of this, he's gone roughly 50% or above. I think there was one year where he went like 48. So we'll call it 50%. He's unlikely to get anywhere near that amount consistently at Freo. Like, there might be the odd game. Maybe he might get some high CBAs or something, but We already know from looking at their CBA splits earlier, and remember I said that it's probably a deliberate thing because it happens like every week. They don't really use anyone outside that top 4 players. Even the 5 and 6, they hardly get a look. I mean, there's no 7th man to even speak of, so yeah, where would his CBAs actually come from in that case? Like he hasn't been training in the midfield at all from what I've seen in the training reports, so all signs are pointing towards little to no CBA action. And yeah, it's as simple as that for me. Like if he's not getting CBAs or he's not likely to get them, he's not a pick, because when he's just sitting forward, he's not going to score nearly enough, and he loves a good floor game. So Freo fans, let me know what you think on that one, or on all of these. I could have gone further and covered Erasmus, O'Driscoll, and even Will Brodie, but there's not much to go on in terms of recent numbers for them. Like Brodie was big a couple of years ago, and yeah, O'Driscoll kind of had all the injury problems, so this year wasn't really reflective of what he can do. And it's basically just a wait and see for these guys. See if they're in the mix or if they're going to get picked, and then we go from there. Can do a video on them later once there's something to actually look at. But yeah, I mean, they've all shown that they can score well at times, and yeah, I was a bit surprised. Erasmus scored like a 128 or something against Collingwood, I think, last year or the year before, I can't remember. But yeah, so obviously, you know, they can all score. But yeah, this video is pretty long already. Like I've covered a lot of players here, and again, time is not something I have a lot of. So that's it for another team preview. Please like, subscribe, and comment. I hate asking for that stuff, but you know, these are really time consuming, as I said, and it's nice to make it feel worthwhile. But you guys already do a good job of that. So yeah, I guess I'll see you in tomorrow's video, hopefully for the Geelong preview. I'm still aiming to keep pumping out daily videos. Just because I missed the 3 doesn't mean I'm gonna stop completely. But yeah, cheers for watching, and yeah, see you in the next one.